The sound of my father's voice boomed across the backyard, each word hitting me like a hammer against concrete. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about my son Liam, valedictorian, varsity captain, and Harvard-bound." I stood by the fold-out table, arranging plastic forks with the same precision I used to lay rebar at the construction site where I once worked. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory from years of being the invisible one, the helper, the background noise to Liam's symphony. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 18 years old today, golden boy Liam, with his perfect smile and effortless charm, basked in the Florida sun, while neighbors and family friends gathered around him like moths to a flame. I watched from the periphery, my worn sneakers planted firmly on the grass that I'd mowed yesterday, another task that went unnoticed. "Noah, can you bring out more ice?" Mom's voice drifted over the crowd. Elena Thompson, ever gentle, ever careful not to make waves. She caught my eye for just a moment, and I saw something there, a flicker of recognition, maybe guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I nodded, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. The Miami heat felt familiar, like those scorching days when I used to climb scaffolding before the accident that changed everything, before I learned what it meant to truly fall. Inside the kitchen, I grabbed bags of ice from the freezer, each one heavy in my hands. Through the window, I could see Dad still holding court, his chest puffed out with pride as he detailed Liam's latest achievement: the basketball scholarship, the academic awards, the bright, shining future that stretched out before his firstborn son like a red carpet. When I returned outside, balancing the ice bags against my chest, I overheard Mrs. Rodriguez from next door asking, "And what about Noah? What's he up to these days?" I froze, hope blooming in my chest like a stubborn weed pushing through concrete. Dad glanced over at me, his expression flickering with something I couldn't quite read. Noah's figuring things out. You know how it is at that age." He turned back to Mrs. Rodriguez with renewed enthusiasm. "But Liam here just got accepted into Harvard's pre-med program with a full academic scholarship." The ice bags felt heavier suddenly. I forced myself to keep walking, to keep moving, to keep existing on the margins of my own family's celebration. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled politely, but I caught the pity in her eyes. The same look I'd seen in the hospital when the nurses realized no one was coming to visit me. I dumped the ice into the cooler with more force than necessary, the cubes scattering like my scattered hopes. 3 months ago, I'd finally gotten my GED after dropping out to support the family. 3 months ago, I'd been accepted to Miami-Dade Community College on a partial scholarship. 3 months ago, I'd tried to tell Dad about it during dinner, but he'd been too busy planning this party, too focused on Liam's achievements to notice mine. "Hey, little brother," Liam's voice cut through my thoughts. He jogged over, his face flushed with happiness and attention. For a moment, I saw something in his expression, not malice, but genuine obliviousness. He had no idea, no clue that every compliment he received felt like a stone thrown at my chest. "Great party," I managed, forcing what I hoped looked like a smile. "Thanks, man. I know you helped Mom set everything up." He squeezed my shoulder, the gesture meant to be brotherly, but it only reminded me of how different we were. His hands were soft from academic success. Mine were calloused from real work, from sacrifice, from years of carrying weight that no one else could see. As he bounded back to his admirers, I retreated to the edge of the yard where the folding chairs sat empty. This was my spot, always on the periphery, always watching, always hoping that someday someone would see me standing there. That's when I noticed Grandpa Henry sitting quietly by himself near the garden shed, his weathered hands folded in his lap, watching me with eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't looking at Liam. He was looking at me. And for the first time all day, I didn't feel invisible. Grandpa Henry's weathered finger beckoned me over.
a subtle gesture that somehow felt more significant than all of Dad's booming announcements combined. I glanced around. Liam was still surrounded by his court of admirers. Mom was refilling the punch bowl, and Dad was deep in conversation about college recruitment strategies. No one would miss me. I crossed the yard, my feet heavy on the grass I'd trimmed yesterday morning before anyone else was awake. Henry sat in the shade of the old oak tree, away from the party's chaos, his silver hair catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. "Sit with me, boy," he said quietly, patting the weathered lawn chair beside him. His voice carried the weight of years, but also something else, a warmth that I rarely felt in this house. I settled into the chair, the plastic creaking under my weight. From here we could see the whole party spread out before us like a stage production, where I'd never been given speaking role. "You know, Henry," he said, his eyes fixed on the celebration, "hell, I've been watching you for years." He turned to face me, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. Recognition. Real recognition. "Grandpa, Shh." He held up a hand, then reached into the canvas bag at his feet. My breath caught as he pulled out an old wooden box, its surface worn smooth by decades of handling. The brass hinges gleamed dully in the filtered sunlight. "This belonged to your great-grandfather, and his father before him." Henry's fingers traced the carved edges. "But it's meant for you now, Noah." My hands trembled as I reached for it. The box was heavier than I expected, solid and real in a way that made everything else, the party, the laughter, Dad's voice carrying across the yard, seem distant and muffled. "What's inside?" I whispered. Henry's eyes crinkled at the corners, but there was something serious in his expression, something that made my stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. "Truth, boy. Letters, photographs, things that'll show you who you really are in this family, who you've always been, even when nobody else could see it." The sounds of the party seemed to fade away completely. Somewhere behind us, I heard Dad's voice rise in another toast to Liam's achievements, but it felt like it was happening in another world entirely. "But I have to warn you," Henry continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "once you open this box, once you see what's inside, it'll change how you see this whole damn family forever. The truth has a way of doing that." My fingers gripped the box tighter. "Good or bad?" Henry smiled, the kind of smile that held both sadness and hope. "That's for you to decide." The box felt like it was burning a hole through my hands as I made my way back to the party. I'd hidden it under my old Miami Hurricanes t-shirt, clutching it against my ribs like a secret that might explode if anyone saw it. Henry had squeezed my shoulder before I left, whispering, "When you're ready, boy. Only when you're ready." But ready for what? The question gnawed at me as I forced myself to rejoin the celebration, plastering on the same invisible smile I'd perfected over 18 years of being the forgotten son. "There you are," Mom called out, relief flickering across her face. "Can you help me bring out the cake? It's time for—" Wait. Dad's voice boomed across the yard, silencing every conversation. "Before we do cake, I have one more surprise for my boy." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. The same one he'd used when announcing Liam's acceptance to Harvard, when showing off his varsity letter, when basically every good thing happened in this house that didn't involve me. Dad disappeared into the house and returned carrying a sleek laptop box, the kind that cost more than I used to make in 2 months at the construction site. The crowd murmured appreciatively as he handed it to Liam with ceremony. "For all your hard work, son, you'll need this for Harvard." Liam's face lit up like he just won the lottery. "Dad, this is incredible. Thank you so much." I stood there holding Mom's good serving platter, watching my brother get handed another piece of his golden future. The box under my shirt seemed to pulse with heat against my ribs. "Noah, honey," Mom whispered, touching my elbow, "could you help me?" But I was already moving toward the house, the platter balanced in my hands. That's when it happened.
My foot caught on the edge of the patio step, the same step I'd been meaning to fix for months, but never had time because I was too busy working overtime to help pay for Liam's college prep courses. The platter went flying. Mom's good china scattered across the concrete like broken dreams, the crash loud enough to stop every conversation in the yard. Jesus Christ, Noah! Can't you watch where you're going? Do you know how much that cost? Heat rushed to my face as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some pitying, some annoyed, all of them seeing me as the clumsy kid who couldn't even carry a plate without screwing up. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, dropping to my knees to gather the pieces. "I'll replace it. With what money?" Dad snapped. "You can barely—" "Mark," Mom's voice was soft but firm. "It was an accident." But the damage was done. I could feel the weight of everyone's judgment, their whispered conversations already starting. Poor Noah. Always in the way, can't do anything right. Liam shifted uncomfortably, his expensive laptop forgotten for a moment. But he didn't say anything. He never did. I finished collecting the broken pieces in silence, the box still pressed against my ribs, like a promise I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. That night, long after the last guest had gone home and Dad had finished recounting Liam's achievements to anyone who'd listen, I sat on my narrow bed staring at the wooden box. The house had finally fallen silent, but my mind was anything but quiet. My hands trembled as I traced the carved edges, feeling the smooth, worn wood that had been touched by generations of men I'd never known. The brass hinges looked ancient, like they'd been waiting decades for this moment. For me. The lock clicked open with a soft sound that seemed to echo in my small room. Inside, yellowed letters were tied with a faded ribbon, their edges soft with age. Underneath lay black and white photographs, some so old the faces looked like ghosts. But it was the envelope at the bottom that made my breath catch. My name written across it in Grandpa Henry's careful handwriting. I picked up the first letter, dated 47 years ago, and began to read. "Margaret, my dear wife, I took on another night shift at the docks. The money isn't much, but little Mark needs new school clothes and we're behind on the mortgage again. I know I'm never home, know the boy barely sees his father, but what choice do I have? A man does what he must for his family, even if no one ever thanks him for it." My throat tightened. This was Henry writing to my grandmother, back when Dad was just a kid. I flipped through more letters, each one telling the same story. A young man working himself to the bone, missing family dinners, missing school plays, missing everything just to keep food on the table. Just like I had done. Just like I was still doing. The photographs showed a thin, tired-looking Henry in work clothes, standing next to construction equipment, holding paychecks, always looking exhausted but determined. In one picture, he stood proudly next to a young boy who could only be my father. Both of them smiling, Henry's hand on Dad's shoulder. When had Dad stopped smiling at his father like that? I picked up the envelope with my name on it, my fingers shaking as I tore it open. Inside were savings bonds. Dozens of them, all made out to me, accumulated over years. At the bottom of the envelope was a folded document that made my heart stop. A will. Henry's will, leaving me his Purple Heart medal, his Bronze Star, and a small plot of land in Homestead that I never knew he owned. The same land where he'd planned to build a house for our family before Dad decided they didn't need his help anymore. But it was the handwritten note attached that broke me. "Noah, your father doesn't see you because he's forgotten what it means to struggle. But I see you, boy. I see every early morning, every sacrifice, every moment you put this family before yourself. You are the strongest of us all, and it's time you knew it. The bonds should be enough for college, maybe more. Use them, build something of your own. Henry." I pressed the letter to my chest and finally let myself cry. Not the bitter tears of rejection I'd shed in the hospital, but something different. Something that felt like coming home to myself for the first time in my life. For once, someone had seen me. Really seen me. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The next morning, I found Dad at the kitchen table surrounded by college brochures and financial aid forms, all stamped with Harvard's Crimson Seal. He was on the phone with someone from the admissions office, his voice animated in a way I'd never heard him use when talking about me. Yes, Liam will definitely accept the pre-med track, he said, making notes on a yellow legal pad. We're so proud of him. I stood in the doorway, Henry's letter folded in my back pocket like a talisman. The savings bonds were hidden in my room, but their weight seemed to follow me everywhere. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged to me, really belonged to me. Dad, I said when he hung up the phone. He barely glanced up from his paperwork. What is it, Noah? I'm busy here. We need to get all of Liam's housing forms submitted by... I need to talk to you about something important. Can it wait? Your brother's future is at stake here. The familiar sting hit me, but this time it felt different, less sharp. Henry's words echoed in my mind. You are the strongest of us all. I pressed on. It's about Grandpa Henry. He gave me something yesterday, a box with Noah. Dad's voice carried that edge of impatience I knew so well. Whatever your grandfather gave you can wait. Right now, we need to focus on what matters. Liam starts Harvard in 3 months and there are 1,000 details to handle. What matters? The words hit like a slap, but I stood my ground. This matters too, Dad. He left me savings bonds, enough for... Don't distract from your brother's big year. Dad cut me off, finally looking up with irritation creasing his forehead. Liam's worked his entire life for this opportunity. The last thing he needs is you creating drama over whatever trinkets Henry decided to pass along. Trinkets. He called Henry's life savings, his medals, his love, trinkets. Across the kitchen, Liam appeared in the doorway, still wearing his Harvard t-shirt from yesterday. He looked between us, reading the tension, but said nothing. Just like always. He grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and started to leave. Liam, I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. Don't you think it's unfair that... He paused, apple halfway to his mouth. For a moment, I thought he might actually say something, but instead he just shrugged. That same casual gesture that dismissed my pain as easily as swatting a fly. I don't know, man. Dad's just excited about college stuff. You get it, right? No, I didn't get it. I didn't get how my brother could be so blind to the obvious favoritism, how he could accept Dad's attention as his natural right while I begged for scraps. But looking at him standing there, golden and oblivious, I realized something that Henry's letter had started to teach me. Liam wasn't my real problem. My real problem was waiting for them to see me instead of seeing myself. 2 days later, I found myself standing on Grandpa Henry's front porch, the wooden box tucked under my arm like a briefcase full of secrets. His small house in Little Havana felt like a sanctuary compared to the tension that had been suffocating me at home. Henry opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been expecting me. His weathered face creased into a knowing smile. Come in, boy. We've got talking to do. His living room was modest but clean, filled with the smell of Café Cubano and old wood. Military medals hung in a simple frame on the wall, the same Bronze Star and Purple Heart mentioned in his will. I'd never really looked at them before, never understood what they meant. You opened it, he said, settling into his worn recliner. It wasn't a question. I nodded, placing the box on his coffee table between us. Dad called your savings bonds trinkets, said I shouldn't distract from Liam's big year. Henry's jaw tightened.
a flash of anger crossing his features. "Sounds about right. Your father's been dismissing the people who matter to him his whole damn life." "What do you mean?" Henry leaned forward, his eyes growing distant. "I worked 3 jobs when Mark was growing up. Docks during the day, warehouse at night, weekends at the auto shop. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, she raised that boy practically alone because I was always chasing the next paycheck, trying to give him everything I never had." He paused, rubbing his gnarled hands together. "But it was never enough for Mark. He wanted the father who came to his baseball games, not the one who bought his equipment. When he graduated high school, got that scholarship to UM, you know what he said to me?" I shook my head, though something cold was settling in my stomach. He said, "Thanks for the money, Dad, but I don't need you anymore." Started dating your mother, stopped coming around, built his own life like I was some embarrassing reminder of where he came from. The weight of recognition hit me like a falling beam. "He's doing the same thing to me." "Worse," Henry said quietly. "At least I got his respect for a while. You? He's been training you to be invisible since you were old enough to walk, making you compete with Liam for scraps of attention that should have been yours by right." I thought about all those years working construction, sending money home, sleeping in that cramped room while Liam got everything handed to him. The accident that left me broken while they threw parties. "Why didn't you do something sooner?" The question came out harder than I intended. Henry's expression softened with something that looked like regret. "Because I was afraid of losing what little connection I had left with him. But watching you yesterday, seeing you disappear into yourself the way I used to," he shook his head. "Some cycles need to be broken, Noah, even if it costs us everything." Mom reached out toward me, her voice soft and pleading. "Noah, honey, maybe we can discuss this after Liam settled at Harvard. Next year, when things are less complicated." Next year. Always next year. Always after Liam's needs were met, his dreams funded, his future secured. "No," I said, the word coming out harder than I intended. "I'm 18 years old. I've been working since I was 15, sending money home, putting this family first while my own life fell apart. I nearly died on that construction site, and none of you even visited me in the hospital." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's not fair," Mom whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "We were busy with Liam's failed exam party." "I know. I was there, Mom, broken ribs and all." I looked at each of them. Dad's angry face, Mom's guilty tears, Liam's uncomfortable silence, and realized that Henry was right. This cycle would never end unless I broke it myself. "I'm using the bonds for school, whether you support me or not." The silence in my room felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. I spread Henry's photographs across my desk, studying the faces of men I'd never known, but somehow understood. My great-grandfather in his work clothes. My great-great-grandfather holding tools with hands that looked like mine. I picked up my phone and called Miami-Dade's admissions office. "I'd like to accept my spot in the photography program, and I'll need information about paying with savings bonds." While she transferred me to financial aid, I stared at Henry's Purple Heart. He'd earned it in Vietnam, taking shrapnel to save his unit. Dad had never mentioned it, never told me that his father was a hero. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparing for school with the same intensity I'd once brought to construction work. I researched professors, course catalogs, equipment requirements. I cashed in enough bonds to cover tuition and bought my first real camera, a used Canon that felt like a promise in my hands. The house grew colder toward me. Dad barely spoke except to make cutting remarks about wasting opportunities. Mom tried to bridge the gap with small gestures, my favorite meals, gentle questions about my classes, but the damage felt too deep for comfort food to heal. Liam surprised me one evening, knocking on my door while I practiced with the camera. "That's actually pretty cool," he said, watching me adjust the lens. "I never knew you were into photography. There's a lot you don't know about me." He sat on the edge of my bed, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I know things have been weird since your fight with Dad. I don't really understand all the family drama stuff, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe it's good that you're doing your own thing. I mean, Harvard's great and all, but sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, you know?" It was the most honest thing my brother had ever said to me. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know." That night, I developed my first roll of film in the makeshift darkroom I'd set up in the basement. As the images emerged in the chemical baths, Henry's weather hands, Mom's worried expression, even Dad's proud smile from Liam's party, I realized I was finally learning to see. Not just through a camera lens, but through my own eyes. For the first time in 18 years, I was becoming visible to myself. 3 weeks later, I walked into the family dinner that Mom had insisted on, one last meal before Liam leaves for Harvard. The dining room felt smaller somehow, the familiar faces around the table like actors in a play I'd outgrown. I brought my camera bag with me, along with a manila folder containing something I'd been working on in secret. My photography professor had encouraged me to document my family history for our first major project, and what I'd discovered while researching had lit a fire in my chest that wouldn't go out. "So, Noah," Mom said, passing the mashed potatoes with forced cheer, "how are your classes going?" "Really well, actually." I pulled out a small stack of photographs I'd printed in the college darkroom. "I wanted to share something with all of you." Dad barely glanced up from cutting his steak. "Can we just have one normal dinner without your hobby taking center stage?" "These aren't just from my hobby, Dad. They're about our family." I spread the photos across the table. Henry in his army uniform, Henry working at the docks, Henry standing proudly next to a young Mark at his high school graduation. And newer ones I'd taken, Henry in his small house, surrounded by the memories Dad had dismissed.
"Where did you get these?" Liam asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. "From Grandpa Henry's collection, and from spending time with him, learning about our real family history." I opened the manila folder and pulled out a document. "Did you know he was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor? Or that he worked 3 jobs to put Dad through college?" Dad's fork clinked against his plate. "Noah, this is inappropriate dinner conversation." "Why? Because it makes you uncomfortable to remember that someone sacrificed for you the way I've been sacrificing for this family?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Mom's eyes widened and Liam stopped chewing. "That's enough," Dad said, his voice dangerous. But I was beyond stopping. "No, it's not enough. It's never been enough, has it? I could work myself to death, literally fall off a building, and it still wouldn't be enough to matter to you." I pulled out Henry's will, the official copy I'd had notarized that week. "Grandpa Henry left me his military medals, his land and homestead, and enough savings bonds to pay for my entire degree because he saw what none of you could see, that I have value beyond what I can give to Liam." Liam's face flushed red. "Noah, I never asked you to. You didn't have to ask." The words exploded out of me. "It was just expected. Saint Liam gets everything handed to him while Noah works in the shadows, invisible, grateful for scraps." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. "But you know what, Liam? I don't blame you anymore. You never chose this dynamic. Dad did." Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "How dare you come into this house and— This is my house too," I said quietly, standing to meet his anger. "And for the first time in my life, I'm not apologizing for taking up space in it." Mom was crying now, her hands pressed to her mouth. But I couldn't stop. 18 years of silence was pouring out like water through a broken dam. "I'm done being invisible." 6 weeks later, I stood in the campus gallery watching strangers study my photographs. My series, Invisible Hands, had been selected for the student exhibition. 20 images documenting the working men in my family, from Henry's weathered dockworker portraits to my own construction site memories. The centerpiece was a photograph I'd taken of Henry holding his Purple Heart, his eyes looking directly into the camera with a strength that seemed to reach across generations. Beneath it, a small placard read, "For all the forgotten ones who built the foundations others stand on." "Noah?" I turned to find Mom standing behind me, her purse clutched nervously in her hands. She'd been trying to bridge the gap since that explosive dinner, calling weekly, asking about my classes. Tonight was the first time she'd actually visited my world. "You came," I said, genuinely surprised. She nodded, tears already forming as she studied the photographs. "These are beautiful, mijo. I never knew you could see things this way." We stood in silence, watching visitors pause at each image. A young woman about my age lingered at a photo of my calloused hands holding a hammer, reading the caption about dreams deferred, but not destroyed. "Your father wanted to come," Mom said quietly, "but he's still struggling with everything that happened." I nodded. Dad's pride had taken a beating when the truth came out. He'd stopped talking about Liam's achievements as much, started asking awkward questions about my classes. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. "And Liam?" Mom smiled for the first time. "He's driving down from Gainesville this weekend. He wants to see the exhibition before it closes." My brother had transferred to University of Florida after 2 months at Harvard, finally admitting he'd chosen pre-med to please Dad rather than himself. He was studying journalism now, finding his own voice after years of living someone else's expectations. "Mom," I said, turning to face her fully, "I don't need Dad to suddenly think I'm perfect. I just need him to see me." She reached out and touched my arm. "He's learning, Noah. We all are."
Across the gallery, Henry appeared in the doorway, wearing his best shirt and leaning on his walking cane. He caught my eye and winked, then made his way slowly through the crowd toward his own image on the wall. I watched him study the photograph of himself, seeing the pride in his weathered face. This was what legacy really meant, not the achievements that got you applause, but the quiet strength that held others up when they needed it most. A photography professor from Florida International University approached me, business card in hand. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to discuss our scholarship program with you." 6 months ago, I would have looked around for someone else to take credit. But now I reached out my hand and introduced myself. "I'm Noah Thompson. Nice to meet you." For the first time in my life, I was visible, and it felt like coming home. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.